The iron gate of the territorial prison groaned open at dawn, and Willa Morrison stepped through it into the bitter Colorado morning with nothing but the thin dress she had worn when they brought her in 3 years ago. The wind cut through the faded fabric like a blade, and she wrapped her arms around herself, teeth already chattering as she stood on the dirt road leading away from the stone fortress that had been her home since she was 19 years old. She had no money, no food, no family waiting, and nowhere to go in a world that had moved on without her. The guard who had released her had barely looked at her face before slamming the gate shut again, the metallic clang echoing across the empty landscape. Willa stood there for a long moment, staring at the mountains in the distance, their peaks white with snow even though it was late spring of 1882. She had dreamed of freedom every night in her cell, but now that she had it, the weight of it pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. She started walking, because there was nothing else to do. The road stretched ahead of her, dusty and rutted from wagon wheels, leading toward the small town of Keeler about 5 miles south. Her feet were bare, the prison having kept her shoes when they were deemed too worn to return, and every stone bit into her soles as she made her way forward. The sun was rising higher now, but it brought no warmth, and Willa could feel her body starting to tremble from more than just the cold. She had gone perhaps a quarter mile when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. Instinct made her tense, made her want to run, but she had learned in prison that running only made things worse. She kept walking, her eyes fixed on the horizon, until the horse drew alongside her and stopped. Willa looked up slowly, prepared for trouble, and found herself staring at a man who seemed carved from the mountains themselves. He sat astride a large bay horse, his frame massive and solid, with shoulders that strained against his worn leather coat. His hair was dark brown and hung past his collar, slightly wild, and his face was weathered from years of sun and wind. His eyes were a startling green, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his gaze because she had learned not to show weakness. "You just got released," he said. It was not a question. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together, but there was something gentle underneath it that made Willa's throat tighten unexpectedly. "That is none of your concern," she said, and her voice came out stronger than she felt. The man nodded slowly as if he had expected that answer. "My name is Emmett Rourke. I live up in the mountains about 15 miles from here. I come down once a month for supplies, and I make it a habit to pass by the prison when I do." "Why?" The word came out before Willa could stop it. "Because sometimes people get released with nowhere to go," Emmett said simply. "And the world is a hard place for a woman alone." Willa felt something hot and angry rise in her chest. "I do not need charity from a stranger." "Did not say you did." Emmett shifted in his saddle, and Willa noticed for the first time that he had a pack horse trailing behind him, laden with supplies. "But it is a long walk to town, and you have no shoes. I can offer you a ride, and when we get to Keeler, you can go your own way. No strings." She wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her to refuse, because in her experience, men who offered help always wanted something in return. But her feet were already bleeding, and the wind was getting colder, and she could feel the exhaustion from 3 years of poor food and little sleep catching up with her all at once. "Just to town," she said finally. Emmett nodded and swung down from his horse with an easy grace that surprised her given his size. Up close, he was even more imposing, easily over 6 feet tall with arms thick with muscle. But his movements were careful as he approached her, as if he understood that she might bolt like a frightened animal. "Can you ride?" he asked. Yes. Willa had grown up on a farm before everything had gone wrong. She knew horses. Emmett held out his hand to help her mount, and after a moment's hesitation, She took it. His palm was rough and calloused, his grip firm but gentle. He lifted her onto the horse as if she weighed nothing, and she settled into the saddle, trying not to think about how long it had been since she had ridden. Emmett swung up behind her, and Willa went rigid as his arms came around her to take the reins. She could feel the solid wall of his chest against her back, could feel the warmth radiating from him, and it made her want to cry for reasons she could not name. "Easy," he said softly, and she realized he was talking to her, not the horse. "I have got you." They rode in silence for a while, the horse's steady gait eating up the miles. Willa tried to hold herself away from Emmett, but the exhaustion was too great, and eventually she found herself leaning back against him, her eyes drifting closed. She jerked herself awake, angry at her own weakness, but Emmett said nothing, just kept the horse moving forward. "What were you in for?" he asked after a while, his voice low and non-judgmental. Willa stiffened. "Does it matter?" "No," Emmett said, "but sometimes it helps to talk about it." "I do not want to talk about it." "All right." They lapsed back into silence, but it was not uncomfortable. Willa found herself studying the landscape, seeing it with fresh eyes after 3 years of stone walls. The mountains were beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, and she could see stands of pine trees covering their slopes, dark green against the pale rock. "You really live up there alone?" she asked, surprising herself. "Most of the time," Emmett said. "I have got a cabin up past the tree line. I trap and hunt, sell the pelts in town. It is a quiet life, but it suits me." "Do you not get lonely?" She felt him shrug behind her. "Sometimes, but I am not much for crowds. I did my time in the war, saw enough of people to last me a while." Willa understood that. She had seen enough of people, too, in prison. The guards who looked through you like you were not human. The other prisoners who would steal your food if you were not careful. The warden who spoke about redemption but treated them all like animals. "I killed someone," she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "That is why I was in prison. They said it was murder, but it was not. He was hurting me, and I defended myself. But the judge did not see it that way because I was just a woman, and he was a respected businessman." Emmett was quiet for a long moment, and Willa braced herself for judgment, for disgust, for him to throw her off the horse and leave her in the dirt where people like her belonged. "Then you did what you had to do," he said finally. "And any man who hurts a woman deserves what he gets." Willa felt tears sting her eyes, and she blinked them back angrily. She had not cried once in 3 years, and she was not going to start now. They reached Keeler as the sun was climbing toward noon. It was a small town, just a single main street lined with wooden buildings that had seen better days. There was a general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, and a few houses scattered around the edges. People stopped to stare as Emmett rode through with Willa in front of him, and she could see the speculation in their eyes, the judgment. Emmett pulled up in front of the general store and dismounted, then helped Willa down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Thank you," she managed, "for the ride." Emmett studied her face, those green eyes seeing too much. "Where are you going to go?" Willa looked around the town at the people who were still watching them with suspicious eyes, and felt something inside her crack. "I do not know," she admitted, and the words felt like a defeat. "The boarding house probably will not take you," Emmett said quietly. "Not once they find out where you came from, and I do not imagine you have money for food or lodging anyway." Willa lifted her chin. "I will figure something out, I always do." "I am sure you will," Emmett said, "but I have another option if you are willing to hear it." Willa waited, her body tense. "Come back to my cabin with me," Emmett said. "I've got space and I could use some help around the place. You can stay as long as you need to until you figure out what you want to do. No strings, no expectations. Just a safe place to rest and get your feet under you." "I do not understand," Willa said slowly. "Why would you do that for a stranger, for a murderer?" "Because everyone deserves a second chance," Emmett said simply. "And because I know what it is like to have nowhere to go. After the war, I came back to find my family dead from fever and my home burned. If someone had not helped me then, I would not be here now. I am just passing it forward." Willa looked into his eyes and saw only sincerity there, no hidden motives, no cruel intentions. It terrified her, that kind of simple kindness, because she did not know what to do with it. "I am not looking for a husband," she said bluntly. "If that is what you are thinking." Emmett actually smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and less weathered. "I am not looking for a wife. I am just offering you a place to stay until you get back on your feet. That is all." Willa hesitated, weighing her options. She could stay in town and try to find work, but Emmett was probably right that no one would hire her once they knew where she came from. She could try to walk to the next town, but she had no shoes and no money, and winter came early in the mountains. Or she could take a chance on this strange, kind man who seemed to want nothing from her except the opportunity to help. "All right," she said finally. "But just until I can figure out what to do next." "That is all I am asking," Emmett said. He went into the general store and came back with a pair of sturdy boots, a warm coat, and a bundle of supplies. He handed the boots to Willa, and she stared at them in disbelief. "You cannot just buy me things," she protested. "Already did," Emmett said. "And you need them. Consider it an advance on the help you will give me around the cabin." Willa wanted to argue, but the boots were warm and sturdy, and her feet were still bleeding from the walk. She sat down on the edge of the wooden sidewalk and pulled them on, and they fit reasonably well. The coat was thick wool, lined with flannel, and when she put it on, she finally stopped shivering. They left town without fanfare, Emmett leading his horses back toward the mountains. This time, Willa rode the pack horse, grateful for the independence even as she was aware of Emmett riding beside her, solid and reassuring in a way that made her uncomfortable. The trail up into the mountains was steep and narrow, winding through dense stands of pine and aspen. The air got thinner and colder as they climbed, but Willa found she did not mind. There was something clean about it, something that made her feel like she could breathe properly for the first time in years. They rode for hours, stopping once to water the horses at a stream that ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Emmett offered Willa some dried meat and bread, and she ate it slowly, trying to make it last, her stomach unused to food that was not thin gruel or stale hardtack. "How much farther?" she asked as they mounted up again. "Another hour or so," Emmett said. "The cabin is pretty remote, that is how I like it." "Do you ever get scared?" Willa asked. "Being up here alone, I mean, with bears and mountain lions and such," Emmett shrugged. "The animals do not bother me much. They have got their territory, I have got mine. As long as I respect them, they respect me. It is people you have to watch out for." Willa could not argue with that. The cabin appeared suddenly, nestled in a clearing surrounded by tall pines. It was larger than Willa had expected, built from solid logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch that ran along the front. There was a small barn off to one side, and a creek running through the property, the sound of it peaceful in the mountain stillness. "It is beautiful," Willa said, and meant it. Emmett looked pleased. "Built it myself about 5 years ago. It is not fancy, but it keeps out the cold and the wet." He helped her down from the horse and led both animals to the barn. Willa followed, watching as he unsaddled them with practiced efficiency and rubbed them down, murmuring to them in a low voice that made them nicker softly in response. "You are good with them," she observed. Horses are honest, Emmett said. They do not lie or pretend to be something they are not. I appreciate that. When the horses were settled, Emmett led Willa into the cabin. The inside was clean and surprisingly cozy, with a large fireplace dominating one wall and a thick bearskin rug on the floor. There was a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, a table and chairs, and a bed in one corner piled high with furs and quilts. Willa looked at the single bed and felt her stomach tighten. Emmett must have seen her expression because he said quickly, "You will take the bed. I will sleep in the loft." He pointed to a ladder that led to a sleeping area above the main room that Willa had not noticed. "I cannot take your bed," Willa protested. "You can, and you will," Emmett said firmly. "It is not up for debate." He lit a fire in the fireplace, and soon the cabin was warm and filled with flickering orange light. Willa stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, not sure what to do with herself, until Emmett pulled out a chair at the table. "Sit," he said. "I will make us something to eat." Willa sat and watched as Emmett moved around the kitchen with the same easy competence he showed with everything else. He put coffee on to boil and started preparing what looked like a stew with dried venison and vegetables from a root cellar she had not noticed. "You do all your own cooking?" she asked. "Who else would do it?" Emmett said with a slight smile. "Like I said, I live alone up here. Most men I know cannot boil water without burning it." "Most men I know would starve if left to their own devices," Emmett agreed. "But I learned quick after the war that I had better figure it out or go hungry." The stew was surprisingly good, rich and hearty, and Willa ate 2 bowls of it without meaning to. Emmett watched her with satisfaction, refilling her bowl without comment when she finished the first. "When did you last have a decent meal?" he asked. 3 years ago," Willa said. "Prison food is not exactly known for quality." "Well, you will eat well here," Emmett promised. "I might live alone, but I believe in taking care of myself." After dinner, Emmett heated water on the stove and poured it into a large metal tub that he set up near the fire. "I will step outside while you wash up," he said. "Take your time. There are clean clothes on the bed that might fit you. They belonged to my sister before she died. I kept them for sentimental reasons, but I think she would have wanted someone to use them." Willa felt tears threaten again at this simple kindness, at the idea of clean clothes and hot water and privacy. "Thank you," she whispered. Emmett just nodded and stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Willa stripped off the prison dress and sank into the hot water with a sigh that came from deep in her soul. She scrubbed 3 years of grime and humiliation from her skin, washed her hair until it squeaked, and tried not to think about the fact that a man she had just met was being kinder to her than anyone had been in longer than she could remember. The clothes on the bed were simple but well made, a cotton dress in soft blue and undergarments that were slightly too big but infinitely better than what she had been wearing. There was also a thick shawl and warm socks, and Willa put them all on, feeling more human than she had in years. When she opened the door, she found Emmett sitting on the porch steps, looking out at the darkening mountains. He turned when he heard her and stood up. "Feel better?" he asked. "Much," Willa said. "Thank you for everything." Emmett nodded and came back inside. He emptied the tub while Willa stood by the fire, running a comb through her wet hair. When she caught sight of herself in a small mirror on the wall, she almost did not recognize the woman looking back at her. She was thinner than she remembered, her cheekbones sharp and her eyes too large in her face, but at least she looked clean. "You should get some sleep," Emmett said. "You look exhausted." Willa was exhausted, bone deep and beyond, but she was also wary. "What about you?" "I will be up in the loft," Emmett said. "And Willa, the door does not have a lock, but you have my word that you are safe here. I will not touch you. I will not hurt you, and I will not expect anything from you except maybe some help around the cabin when you are feeling up to it. All right." Willa looked into his eyes and saw only honesty there. "All right," she said softly. She climbed into the bed and pulled the furs and quilts over herself, and it was like being wrapped in clouds. She heard Emmett climb the ladder to the loft, heard him moving around up there, and then everything went quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the sound of the creek outside. Willa lay in the darkness and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. She had woken up in a prison cell expecting to walk into a cold, uncaring world with nothing and no one. And instead, she had found herself in a warm cabin in the mountains with a man who seemed genuinely kind without wanting anything in return. It was too good to be true, she told herself. There had to be a catch, some price she would have to pay eventually. But as she drifted off to sleep, surrounded by warmth and comfort, she found herself hoping, just a little, that maybe this time things would be different. Willa woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, and for a moment she thought she was dreaming. She opened her eyes to find sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and Emmett at the stove, cooking breakfast. "Morning," he said when he saw her stirring. "Hope you slept well." Willa sat up slowly, disoriented. "What time is it?" "About 9, Emmett said. "I figured I would let you sleep. You looked like you needed it." Willa could not remember the last time she had slept past dawn. In prison, they woke you at 5 every morning without fail. She climbed out of bed, feeling guilty. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to sleep so late." Emmett looked at her with surprise. "Why are you apologizing? There is no schedule here. You sleep when you are tired, you eat when you are hungry. That is the beauty of living in the mountains." He dished up plates of eggs and bacon and thick slices of bread fried in butter, and Willa ate until she was uncomfortably full. She could not seem to stop herself, as if her body was trying to make up for 3 years of deprivation all at once. After breakfast, Emmett showed her around the property. The barn was well built and housed the 2 horses plus a milk cow that Emmett milked every morning. There was a chicken coop with half a dozen hens scratching in the dirt, and a large garden plot that was currently empty but would be planted soon. "I do most of my own food production," Emmett explained. "Hunt and trap for meat, grow vegetables in the summer, preserve what I can for winter. The only things I buy in town are flour, sugar, coffee, and ammunition." "That is a lot of work for one person," Willa observed. "It is," Emmett agreed, "but I like the work. Keeps me busy, keeps me sane." "What about winter?" Willa asked. "Does it get bad up here?" "It gets very bad," Emmett said. "Snow can be 10 feet deep, and I sometimes do not see another human for months at a time. But I stock up on supplies and I have got plenty of firewood. It is peaceful in a way." Willa tried to imagine that kind of isolation, and found she could not decide if it sounded terrifying or wonderful. Over the next few days, Willa settled into a routine. She helped Emmett with the morning chores, feeding the animals and collecting eggs and hauling water from the creek. She learned how to milk the cow, though her first attempts were clumsy and made Emmett laugh in a way that was never cruel, just amused. She cooked meals while Emmett worked on various projects around the property, repairing fences and splitting wood and tending to his trap lines. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence while Emmett carved wood and Willa mended clothes that needed repair. It was a simple life, quieter than anything Willa had ever known, and she found herself starting to relax in a way she had not thought possible. Emmett was exactly what he appeared to be, a kind man who asked nothing of her except her company and some help with the chores. He never pressed her to talk about her past, never judged her for what she had done, never made her feel like she was anything less than a person deserving of respect. But despite the peace, Willa found herself increasingly aware of Emmett in ways that made her uncomfortable. She noticed the way his muscles flexed when he lifted heavy logs, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he bent over his work, the sound of his laugh when something amused him. She noticed the gentle way he handled the animals, the patience he showed when teaching her new skills, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She tried to push these feelings away, told herself she was just grateful to him for his kindness, that it was not anything more than that. But as the days turned into weeks, she found it harder and harder to ignore the way her heart would speed up when he came near, the way she looked for excuses to be close to him, the way she caught herself watching him when she thought he was not looking. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after she had arrived, Willa was in the garden helping Emmett plant seeds. It was early June, and the weather had finally warmed enough to risk putting in vegetables. They worked side by side in the sun, and Willa was acutely aware of Emmett kneeling next to her, his shoulder occasionally brushing against hers. "You are good at this," Emmett said, nodding at the neat rows she had planted. "I grew up on a farm," Willa said. "Before everything went wrong, I mean. My father grew wheat mostly, but my mother kept a big vegetable garden. I used to help her." "What happened to them?" Emmett asked gently. Willa was quiet for a moment, deciding how much to share. "They died of cholera when I was 17, within a day of each other. After that, I went to work for a family in Denver as a housekeeper. That is where I met him. The man I killed." Emmett stopped working and looked at her, waiting. "His name was Gerald Thompson," Willa continued, the words coming easier now that she had started. "He was the head of the household, a banker, supposedly upstanding and moral. His wife was always sick, always in bed, and he would find reasons to corner me when no one was around. He would touch me, say things to me. I told the mistress, but she did not believe me. Said I was trying to seduce her husband." Willa pulled a weed from the soil with more force than necessary. "One night, he came to my room. He had been drinking, and he was angry because I had locked my door. He broke it down, and he told me that I belonged to him, that no one would believe me if I told. He tried to force himself on me, and I grabbed the fire poker from the hearth and hit him. I only meant to make him stop, to get him away from me, but he fell and hit his head on the bed frame. He died instantly." Emmett reached over and took her hand, his grip warm and solid. "That was not murder," he said firmly. "That was self-defense." "The jury did not see it that way," Willa said bitterly. "They saw a poor girl who killed a rich man. His wife testified that I had been trying to seduce her husband all along, that I was jealous when he rejected me. The judge gave me 10 years, but you only served 3. They let some of us out early because the prison was overcrowded," Willa explained. "Governor needed to make space for the real criminals, I suppose. Or maybe they just figured I had suffered enough." Emmett was quiet for a long moment, still holding her hand. Then he said, "I am glad they let you out, and I am glad I was there that day." Willa looked at him, at the sincerity in his green eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. "I am glad too," she admitted. They went back to planting, but Emmett did not let go of her hand for a few more seconds, and when he finally did, Willa felt the loss of his warmth like a physical thing. That night, Willa could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to the sound of the creek and the wind in the pines, thinking about Emmett up in the loft, wondering if he was awake too. She thought about the way he had held her hand, the way he had looked at her, and she wondered if maybe, possibly, he felt something for her too. But even if he did, what could she offer him? She was a convicted murderer with no money, no family, no prospects. She had nothing except the clothes on her back, and those were not even hers. Emmett deserved better than someone like her, someone broken and damaged and used up. She must have eventually fallen asleep because she woke to the sound of shouting. It took her a moment to orient herself, and then she realized the shouting was coming from outside. She threw back the covers and ran to the window, her heart pounding. There were 3 men on horseback in the clearing, rough-looking and armed. Emmett was on the porch, his rifle in his hands, his body tense and ready for a fight. "I told you last time I am not interested in selling," Emmett was saying, his voice hard in a way Willa had never heard before. "And we told you that this land is too valuable to waste on one man," one of the riders said. He was older, with a scar across his cheek and mean eyes. "Mr. Patterson wants this property for his logging operation, and he is willing to pay fair price." "I do not care what Patterson wants," Emmett said. "This is my land, legally purchased and paid for. I have got the deed. Now get off my property before I make you." The scarred man laughed. "You and what army, mountain man? There are 3 of us and 1 of you." "2 of us," Willa said, stepping out onto the porch with the shotgun she had found hanging by the door. Her hands were steady even though her heart was racing. She had learned to shoot as a girl, and prison had taught her not to back down from a fight. The men looked at her with surprise, and then the scarred one grinned. Well, did not know you had a woman up here, Rourke. Nice looking too once you clean off the prison stink." Willa felt ice run through her veins. How did he know where she had come from? "Last chance," Emmett said, his voice deadly quiet. "Leave now, or I start shooting." The scarred man held up his hands in mock surrender. All right, we are going, but Patterson is not going to give up on this land, Rourke. You had better think carefully about whether it is worth dying for." They rode off, their horses kicking up dust, and Emmett waited until they were out of sight before lowering his rifle. He turned to Willa, and she saw anger and something else, something like fear in his eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I should be asking you that," Willa said. "Who were those men?" Emmett sighed and leaned his rifle against the cabin wall. "Work for a man named Silas Patterson who owns a big logging operation out of Denver. He has been buying up land in these mountains for the past year, wants to clear-cut the whole area. I have refused to sell, and he is getting more aggressive about it." "He sent men with guns," Willa pointed out. "That is more than aggressive." "I know." Emmett ran a hand through his hair, and Willa noticed it was shaking slightly. "I have been hoping he would give up and move on, but it looks like I was wrong." "What are you going to do?" "I do not know," Emmett admitted. "I do not want to sell. This is my home, my land. But I also do not want anyone to get hurt." He looked at Willa when he said that last part, and she realized he was worried about her. The thought made her feel warm and terrified at the same time. "I am not afraid of men like that," she said. "You should be," Emmett said. "They are dangerous. And if they know you are here, if they know where you came from, they will try to use that against us." "How did they know?" Willa asked. "About the prison. Small towns have big mouths," Emmett said. "Someone in Keeler probably saw us together and started talking. News travels fast in places like this." Willa felt guilt settle heavy in her stomach. "I am sorry. I have brought you trouble." "No," Emmett said firmly, stepping closer to her. "You have not brought me anything except good company and a lot of help around here. Patterson was a problem long before you showed up. This is not your fault." But Willa could not shake the feeling that she was a liability, that Emmett would be better off without her. She spent the rest of the day quiet and withdrawn, and Emmett watched her with concern but did not push her to talk. That night after dinner, Willa made a decision. "I should leave," she announced. "Tomorrow I will go back to town and find work somewhere. You have been more than kind, but I cannot stay here and put you in danger." Emmett, who had been carving a piece of wood by the fire, looked up sharply. "What are you talking about, those men?" Willa said. "They know about me, they know I am here. They will use me to get to you." It is better if I just go." Emmett set down his carving and stood up. "Willa, those men are not after you. They want my land. Whether you are here or not makes no difference to them." "But they know I am a criminal," Willa insisted. "They can use that to make trouble for you." "What if they tell the law that you are harboring a murderer?" "You served your time," Emmett said. "You are not harboring, and even if they tried something, I would deal with it." "Why?" Willa burst out, frustration and confusion making her voice sharp. "Why would you deal with it? Why do you care what happens to me? I am nothing to you, just some woman you picked up outside a prison. You do not owe me anything." Emmett crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides, and suddenly he was standing right in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his body. His eyes were intense, searching her face. "You think you are nothing to me," he said, his voice low and rough. "Willa, you are not nothing. You are smart and strong and braver than anyone I have ever met. You have been through hell and came out the other side still fighting. Do you have any idea how incredible that is?" Willa stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Emmett, I know you have got no reason to trust me," Emmett continued. "I know you probably think I am just another man who wants something from you, but I need you to understand something. When I saw you standing outside that prison gate, looking so lost and alone, something in me just knew I had to help you. And every day since then, every moment I have spent with you, has only made me more certain that you walking into my life was the best thing that has happened to me in years." "You do not mean that," Willa whispered, but she wanted desperately for it to be true. "I do mean it," Emmett said. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his large, calloused hand. "I know it is too soon, and I know you have got no reason to feel the same way, but Willa, I am falling in love with you. I have been since the day I met you, and I cannot let you leave thinking that you are some kind of burden. You are not. You are a gift." Willa felt tears spill down her cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. "I am scared," she admitted. "I am scared to trust you. Every time I have trusted someone, they have hurt me." "I know," Emmett said gently, brushing away her tears with his thumb. "And I cannot promise that I will never make mistakes or never hurt you unintentionally. But I can promise that I will never intentionally cause you pain, never betray your trust, and never make you feel like you are anything less than precious to me." Willa looked into his eyes and saw only honesty and tenderness there. And something inside her, something that had been locked away and protected for so long, finally cracked open. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me." Emmett smiled, that soft, gentle smile that transformed his whole face. "It terrifies me too," he admitted. "But maybe we can be terrified together." He leaned down slowly, still giving her every chance to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and tenderness, and Willa felt something inside her settle and align, like a puzzle piece finally finding its place. When they pulled apart, Emmett rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said softly. "Please stay. Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because I want you here. Because I want to see where this could go between us." "All right," Willa said, and this time when she agreed to stay, it felt like a beginning rather than a temporary solution. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time in 3 years, Willa felt like she was home. The next few weeks were a revelation for Willa. Emmett courted her in his own quiet way, picking wildflowers for her when he was out checking his trap lines, cooking her favorite meals, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings, and telling her stories about his life before the war. He was gentle and patient, never pushing her for more than she was ready to give, and Willa found herself falling deeper in love with him every day. She learned that he had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 4 children. He had joined the Union Army at 18 and fought for 4 long years, seeing things that still haunted him in his dreams. When he came home, he found that his entire family had died during a cholera outbreak, and the farm had been seized for unpaid taxes. "I had nothing left," Emmett told her one evening as they sat watching the sunset. "So I came west, figured I would start over somewhere no one knew me. I worked odd jobs for a few years, saved up enough to buy this land and built the cabin. It was supposed to be a temporary thing, a place to heal and figure out what I wanted. But then I realized I did not want to leave. This place gave me peace." "You still have nightmares?" Willa asked. "About the war?" "Sometimes," Emmett admitted. "Less often than I used to, though. Being up here helps, and having you here helps even more." Willa leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. But the peace could not last forever. About a month after the confrontation with Patterson's men, trouble came again. Willa was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard the sound of many horses approaching. She stood up, her heart sinking, and counted at least 6 riders coming up the trail. Emmett was out checking his trap lines and would not be back for another hour. The riders stopped at the edge of the clearing, and Willa recognized the scarred man from before. This time, he had brought more men with him, all armed and looking ready for trouble. "Well, if it is not the jailbird," the scarred man said with a nasty grin. "Where is Rourke?" "Not here," Willa said, keeping her voice steady. "And you are trespassing. Leave now." "Or what?" one of the other men said with a laugh. "You will shoot all 6 of us." Willa did not move from where she was standing, but her mind was racing, calculating distances and odds. The shotgun was in the cabin, too far to reach, but there was a pitchfork leaning against the fence about 10 feet to her left. "Look, honey," the scarred man said in a mockingly kind voice. "We do not have any quarrel with you. We just need Rourke to see reason. This land is wasted on him, and Patterson is willing to pay good money for it. But if Rourke will not sell, well, maybe we need to give him some incentive." He nodded to 2 of his men who dismounted and started walking toward the cabin. "Do not," Willa said sharply. "Touch nothing," the scarred man laughed. "Or what, sweetness? You going to stop us?" The 2 men reached the cabin door, and one of them pulled out a torch. Willa felt cold rage wash over her, the same rage she had felt the night she killed Gerald Thompson. "I said do not," she repeated, and this time there was something in her voice that made the men pause. "She is just a woman, boys," the scarred man said. "Ignore her." But before anyone could move, a rifle shot cracked through the air, and the torch fell from the man's hand. Everyone spun around to see Emmett standing at the tree line, his rifle aimed and his face harder than stone. "The next shot goes through someone's head instead of past it," Emmett said coldly. "Now get off my land." "There are 6 of us, Rourke," the scarred man said, but Willa could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "And I've got a 30-shot repeating rifle and enough ammunition to kill you all twice over," Emmett said. "Plus a woman who has already killed 1 man who threatened her and would not hesitate to do it again. So I suggest you take your friends and ride out of here while you still can." Willa had moved during the standoff and now held the pitchfork in her hands, her stance making it clear she knew how to use it. The men looked at each other, weighing their options, and apparently decided it was not worth dying for. "Patterson is not going to let this go," the scarred man said as he remounted his horse. "Then Patterson can come talk to me himself," Emmett said. "But if I see you on my land again, I will not give a warning shot." The men rode off, and Emmett waited until they were gone before lowering his rifle and running to Willa. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently. Did they hurt you?" "I am fine," Willa assured him, though she was shaking now that the danger had passed. "They just wanted to scare us." "It worked," Emmett said grimly. "Willa, this is getting too dangerous. Maybe we should go to the sheriff, tell him what is happening." "Will he help?" Willa asked. "Or is he in Patterson's pocket?" Emmett sighed. "I do not know, but I do know I cannot let this continue. If something happened to you because of me—" "Nothing is going to happen to me," Willa said firmly. "We will figure this out together." They went into town the next day, both armed and watchful. The sheriff was a heavy-set man named Bill Thornton who listened to their story with a skeptical expression. "That is a pretty serious accusation you are making," he said when they finished. "Silas Patterson is a respected businessman." "He is a bully who is trying to force me off my land," Emmett said, "and I have got witnesses that his men threatened to burn down my cabin." "What witnesses?" Sheriff Thornton asked. "Just you and your woman." "No offense, Rourke, but that is not exactly reliable testimony, especially given her history." Willa felt her face flush with anger and shame, but Emmett put a protective hand on her arm. "Her history is that she defended herself from a man who was attacking her," Emmett said coldly. "And she served her time for it. She is a free woman, and her word is worth just as much as anyone else's." Sheriff Thornton shrugged. "Maybe so, but it is still your word against Patterson's, and he has got a lot more money and influence than you do. My advice is to take his offer and find yourself another piece of land." "I am not selling," Emmett said through gritted teeth. "Then you are on your own," the sheriff said. "I cannot help you with this." They left the sheriff's office, and Willa could see the frustration and worry on Emmett's face. "We should go to Denver," she said. "File a complaint with the territorial marshal. Surely Patterson cannot have bought everyone off." "Maybe," Emmett said doubtfully. "But that would mean leaving the cabin unprotected for days. Who knows what Patterson's men would do while we were gone?" They were walking back to where they had tied the horses when a well-dressed man stepped out of the saloon and approached them. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and expensive clothes, and he moved with the confidence of someone who was used to getting his way. "Emmett Rourke," he said, extending his hand. "I am Silas Patterson. I believe you have met some of my employees." Emmett ignored the offered hand. "If by met you mean they threatened to burn down my cabin, then yes." Patterson frowned. "I assure you that was not on my orders. I simply asked them to make you another offer for your property. If they overstepped, I apologize." "I am not interested in selling," Emmett said flatly. "Everyone is interested in selling at the right price," Patterson said smoothly. "I am prepared to offer you 3 times what you paid for that land. That is more than generous, Mr. Rourke." "The land is not for sale at any price," Emmett said. Patterson's expression hardened. "You are being unreasonable. That land is perfect for my logging operation, and I need it to complete my holdings in this area. You are one man living alone in the mountains. What do you need with all that property?" "It is my home," Emmett said simply. "And I am not alone." He put his arm around Willa's shoulders and she leaned into him, presenting a united front. Patterson looked at Willa for the first time, his eyes assessing and cold. "Ah yes, the prisoner. I heard Rourke had taken in a charity case." "Tell me, miss, does he know exactly what you did to earn your sentence?" "He knows everything," Willa said, lifting her chin defiantly. "And unlike you, he does not judge people by their past mistakes." "How noble," Patterson said with a thin smile. "But nobility does not pay bills or protect you from trouble. You should convince your man to take my offer, miss. Things could get very difficult for both of you if he continues to refuse." "Is that a threat?" Emmett asked dangerously. "It is a friendly warning," Patterson said. "Accidents happen in the mountains. Fires start, people go missing. It would be a shame if something unfortunate happened to you or your lady friend." Emmett took a step toward Patterson, his fists clenched, but Willa held him back. "Come on," she said quietly. "He is not worth it." They walked away, leaving Patterson standing in the street, and Willa could feel his eyes on them until they mounted their horses and rode out of town. The ride back to the cabin was tense and silent. When they arrived, Emmett checked every inch of the property to make sure nothing had been disturbed, and then he started preparing for a siege. He brought in extra firewood, checked all his ammunition, and made sure all the windows had heavy shutters that could be barred from the inside. He set up a watch schedule with one of them always awake and alert, and he taught Willa how to use the rifle in case she needed to defend herself. "I hate this," Willa said one night as they sat by the fire, both tired and on edge. "I hate that we cannot just live in peace. I hate that people like Patterson think they can take whatever they want just because they have money." "I know," Emmett said, "but we are not giving up. This is our home and we are going to fight for it." "What if it is not enough?" Willa asked quietly. "What if Patterson wins?" Emmett pulled her close, tucking her head under his chin. "Then we will find another piece of land and start over. As long as we are together, we can handle anything." Willa wanted to believe him, but she could not shake the feeling that something bad was coming. 2 weeks later, her fears were realized. It was just after midnight when Willa smelled smoke. She was on watch, sitting by the window with the rifle across her lap, and at first she thought she was imagining it. But then she saw the orange glow coming from the direction of the barn. "Emmett!" She shouted, and he was down from the loft in seconds, pulling on his boots even as he grabbed his rifle. They ran outside to find the barn fully engulfed in flames. The horses were screaming inside, terrified, and Emmett ran toward the burning building without hesitation. "Emmett, no!" Willa screamed, but he was already inside. She stood frozen for a moment, torn between running to help him and staying to watch for whoever had set the fire. Then she heard a sound behind her and spun around to see 3 of Patterson's men emerging from the shadows. "Well, well," one of them said with a grin. "Looks like there has been a terrible accident." Willa raised the rifle and fired, aiming high to warn them off. The men scattered and she ran toward the barn, her heart in her throat. Emmett emerged from the smoke leading both horses, his face blackened with soot and his shirt singed. He released the horses and they bolted away from the fire, and then he grabbed Willa's hand. "The cow," he shouted over the roar of the flames. "Leave her," Willa pleaded. "It is too dangerous." But Emmett was already running back in, and Willa had no choice but to follow. The heat was incredible, the smoke so thick she could barely see. She found Emmett struggling with the cow, which was frozen in terror, and together they managed to get it moving toward the door. They burst out of the barn just as part of the roof collapsed behind them, and they ran until they were well clear of the flames. The barn was a total loss, and Willa could see that the fire had spread to the woodpile and was threatening the cabin. They spent the rest of the night fighting the fire, using buckets of water from the creek and blankets to beat out the flames. By the time the sun rose, they had managed to save the cabin, but the barn was nothing but a smoking ruin, and they were both exhausted and covered in soot. "This is it," Emmett said, staring at the destruction with a blank expression. "This is war." "What are we going to do?" Willa asked. "We are going to end this," Emmett said grimly, "one way or another." They cleaned up and tended to the animals, who had come back after the danger passed, and then they rode into town. Emmett went straight to the telegraph office and sent a message to the territorial marshal in Denver, detailing everything that had happened and requesting immediate assistance. Then they went back to the sheriff's office. "Someone burned down my barn last night," Emmett told Sheriff Thornton. 3 of Patterson's men were there. "I am filing a formal complaint and I want it on record." The sheriff sighed. "You got proof it was Patterson's men?" My woman saw them, Emmett said. So again, just your word, the sheriff said. Look, Rourke, I am trying to be reasonable here, but you are making it real difficult. Why do you not just sell the land and move on? Because it is mine, Emmett said, his voice hard as iron. And I am not letting a bully push me around. You can either do your job and help me, or you can get out of the way and let me handle this myself. Are you threatening me? The sheriff asked, half rising from his chair. I am telling you how it is going to be, Emmett said. Now take my complaint or do not, but either way, I am holding you responsible if anything else happens. They left the sheriff's office and ran into Patterson himself on the street. He looked at their soot-stained clothes and Emmett's furious expression with false concern. I heard about the fire, he said. Terrible tragedy. Old barns can be so dangerous, especially with hay stored inside. You know exactly what happened, Emmett said, stepping toward him. And I am warning you now, if you send your men anywhere near my property again, I will not hold back. Is that a threat, Mr. Rourke? Patterson asked mildly. It is a promise, Emmett said. Patterson's expression turned cold. You are a fool, Rourke. You could have had a nice pile of money and a fresh start somewhere else. Instead, you are going to lose everything. That woman of yours, too. Emmett moved so fast that Willa barely saw it. One moment he was standing next to her, and the next he had Patterson by the throat, slammed against the wall of the building. If you so much as look at her wrong, I will kill you, Emmett said quietly. Do you understand me? I will kill you and every man who works for you. Patterson's face was turning red, and several of his men started forward, but Willa raised her rifle and they stopped. Let him go, Emmett, she said softly. He is not worth hanging for. Emmett held Patterson for another few seconds, making sure his message was understood, then released him. Patterson gasped for air, rubbing his throat. You are a dead man, Rourke, he wheezed. Maybe, Emmett said, but I will take you with me. They rode back to the cabin, and Emmett was silent the whole way, his jaw clenched and his eyes distant. Willa could see he was at the end of his rope, that the constant threat and harassment had worn him down to something hard and dangerous. When they got home, Emmett started loading weapons and checking his ammunition supply. Willa watched him for a few minutes, then went to him and took the rifle out of his hands. Stop, she said gently. I have to be ready, Emmett said. They are coming back, Willa, you know they are. I know, she said. But right now, I need you to stop and breathe and remember what we are fighting for. Emmett looked at her, and she saw the fear and fury and exhaustion in his eyes. She put her arms around him, and after a moment, he hugged her back so tightly it almost hurt. I cannot lose you, he said into her hair. I cannot lose this place, this life we are building. It is all I have. You are not going to lose me, Willa promised. And we are not going to lose this fight. We are going to be smart and patient, and we are going to wait for the marshal to come from Denver. What if he does not come? Emmett asked. What if Patterson got to him too? Then we will figure something else out, Willa said. But we are not giving up, and we are not letting them turn us into killers. Do you hear me? Emmett nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. All right, he said. All right. They spent the next week preparing for whatever might come. They fortified the cabin, bringing in supplies and setting up defensive positions. Emmett taught Willa everything he knew about tactics and survival, and she proved to be a quick study. But underneath the practical preparations, there was something else growing between them. The danger had stripped away all pretense, all hesitation, and left only raw honesty. They made love for the first time on a warm June night, with the stars visible through the window and the sound of the creek, providing a gentle soundtrack. Emmett was careful and tender, always asking if she was all right, if she wanted to stop. But Willa did not want to stop. She wanted to feel alive, to feel connected to this man who had given her so much, who had shown her that not all men were cruel and selfish. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, and Emmett traced patterns on her shoulder with his fingers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know this is not the best time to say it with everything that is happening, but I need you to know. Whatever happens, I love you." "I love you too," Willa said, turning to face him. "And when this is over, when Patterson is dealt with and we can finally have peace, I want to stay here with you. I want to build a life with you." "Is that a proposal?" Emmett asked with a slight smile. "Maybe," Willa said. "Or maybe it is just a statement of intent." Emmett kissed her softly. "Either way, my answer is yes." The marshal finally arrived a week later, riding up to the cabin with a deputy and looking tired and irritated. His name was John Fletcher, and he was a stern man in his 50s with a no-nonsense attitude. "All right, Rourke," he said after dismounting. "I got your wire and I have been doing some investigating. Tell me everything that has happened and do not leave anything out." They spent the next hour explaining the situation, showing him the burned remains of the barn, telling him about the threats and intimidation. Marshal Fletcher took notes and asked pointed questions, and when they were done, he nodded slowly. "I have been hearing rumors about Silas Patterson for a while now," he said. "Other people who have had trouble with him, other properties he has acquired under suspicious circumstances. But nobody has been willing to testify against him because they are scared. Are you willing to testify?" "Absolutely," Emmett said. "Me too," Willa added. Marshal Fletcher looked at her with surprise. "You are the woman who was just released from the territorial prison, correct? You killed a man." "I defended myself from a man who was trying to rape me," Willa said steadily. "I served 3 years for it, and I am not ashamed of what I did." The marshal studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. If you are both willing to testify, I will bring Patterson in for questioning, but I want you both to understand this could get ugly. Patterson has money and influence, and he will fight this with everything he has got." "We understand," Emmett said, "but we are not backing down." Marshal Fletcher and his deputy rode back to town, and Emmett and Willa waited. 2 days later, a rider came with a message asking them to come to town for a hearing. The hearing was held in the small courthouse, with half the town crammed into the gallery to watch. Patterson sat at one table with 2 expensive lawyers, looking confident and calm. Emmett and Willa sat at the other table with Marshal Fletcher, and Willa could feel everyone's eyes on her, judging her. The hearing lasted most of the day. Witness after witness came forward to talk about Patterson's business dealings, about the pressure he put on people to sell, about the accidents and fires that happened to those who refused. Emmett and Willa both testified about what had happened to them, and Willa spoke clearly and firmly, not letting anyone make her feel small or ashamed. Patterson's lawyers tried to discredit them, bringing up Willa's criminal record, and suggesting that Emmett was an unstable hermit who was making up stories. But Marshal Fletcher had done his homework, and he had found several of Patterson's men willing to testify against him in exchange for leniency. The scarred man was one of them. He sat on the witness stand and admitted to setting fire to Emmett's barn on Patterson's orders. He admitted to threatening other property owners, to intimidating and harassing people, all at Patterson's behest. By the time the hearing was over, Patterson's confident expression had cracked, and the judge looked stern and angry. "Mr. Patterson," the judge said, "based on the testimony I have heard today, I am issuing a warrant for your arrest on charges of arson, criminal intimidation, and conspiracy. You will be held in custody pending a full trial. Bail is set at $10,000. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs, and Patterson's face went purple with rage. "This is an outrage," he shouted. "I am a respected businessman. I will not be treated like a common criminal. You will be treated according to your actions," the judge said coldly. "Sheriff, take him into custody." They left the courthouse feeling dazed and relieved. It was not over yet. There would still be a trial, but for the first time in weeks, Willa felt like maybe things were going to be all right. "We did it," she said to Emmett as they mounted their horses. "We actually did it." "You did it," Emmett said, looking at her with pride and love. "You were so brave in there, Willa. So strong." They rode home in the fading light, and that night they celebrated quietly, just the two of them and the peaceful sound of the mountains around them. The trial took place 2 months later, in the late summer of 1882. Patterson's lawyers fought hard, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 15 years in prison. With Patterson behind bars, his business empire crumbled. His properties were sold off to pay his debts, and the men who had worked for him scattered to find employment elsewhere. The mountains around Emmett's cabin were left in peace, no longer threatened by logging operations. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Emmett and Willa rebuilt the barn together, working side by side through the long summer days. They expanded the garden and put up preserves for the winter. They went into town less and less, preferring the quiet solitude of their mountain home. In September, Emmett asked Willa to marry him properly, with a ring he had made himself from silver ore he found in the mountains. She said yes without hesitation, and they were married by the circuit preacher who came through Keeler once a month. It was a simple ceremony, held in the small church with just a handful of witnesses. Willa wore a new dress that she had sewn herself, pale yellow with white lace, and Emmett wore his best shirt and a vest. He looked so handsome and nervous that Willa wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Emmett kissed her with such tenderness and joy that Willa felt like her heart might burst. They spent their wedding night in the cabin, and Willa fell asleep in her husband's arms, feeling safer and happier than she had ever felt in her life. The winter of 1882 was hard, with deep snows and bitter cold, but Willa did not mind. She and Emmett were cozy in their cabin, with plenty of food and firewood and each other for company. They spent the long evenings by the fire, talking and laughing and making plans for the future. In the spring, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She told Emmett one morning over breakfast, and he went very still for a moment before a huge grin spread across his face. "Really?" he said. "We are going to have a baby." "Really?" Willa confirmed, and then she was in his arms, being spun around the cabin while he laughed with pure joy. The pregnancy was not easy. Willa was sick for the first few months, and toward the end she was so uncomfortable she could barely sleep. But Emmett was patient and attentive, taking over all the heavy chores and making sure she rested. Their son was born in January of 1883, during a blizzard that left them snowed in for a week. Emmett helped deliver the baby, following the instructions from a medical book he had bought in town, and when he placed the squalling infant in Willa's arms, she saw tears on his face. "He is perfect," Emmett said in wonder. "Willa, he is perfect." They named him Thomas, after Emmett's father, and he had his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. Willa had never known it was possible to love someone so much, so instantly and completely. The years that followed were good ones. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah in 1885 and another son named James in 1887. The cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family, with Emmett adding rooms and a larger loft. Willa taught the children to read and write, using books they ordered from Denver. Emmett taught them to hunt and fish and survive in the mountains. They grew up strong and healthy, wild and free in a way that city children could never be. Keeler grew too. transforming from a rough frontier town into a proper community with a school and a doctor, and even a small library. Willa and Emmett were respected members of the community, known for their integrity and hard work. Sometimes people would ask Willa about her past, about her time in prison, and she would tell them the truth without shame. She had done what she had to do to survive, and she had paid her debt to society. What mattered was who she was now, not who she had been. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Emmett took Willa up to a high meadow that overlooked the valley. It was summer, and wildflowers covered the ground in a riot of color. They sat together watching the sunset, their hands intertwined. "You ever regret it?" Emmett asked. "Coming here with me that first day, taking a chance on a strange mountain man?" Willa looked at him, at the gray that was starting to show in his hair, at the lines around his eyes from years of laughter and sun. She thought about everything they had been through together, all the struggles and triumphs, all the love and joy they had built. "Never," she said firmly. "You saved my life that day, Emmett. You gave me a home and a family and a future I never thought I could have. I would not change a single thing." "Me either," Emmett said, pulling her close. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Rourke." They sat there until the stars came out, wrapped in each other's arms, and Willa thought about how far she had come from that terrified woman standing outside the prison gate. She had been lost and alone, with nowhere to go and no hope for the future. But Emmett had been there waiting, ready to take her home. And in doing so, he had given her everything she had ever wanted. A place to belong, a purpose, and a love that would last the rest of their lives. As the years continued to pass, Willa and Emmett grew old together in their mountain home. Thomas grew up to be a skilled tracker and hunter like his father, eventually marrying a schoolteacher from Keeler and settling on a piece of land not far from the cabin. Sarah became a midwife, learning the trade from the town doctor and helping bring new life into the world throughout the valley. James, the youngest, inherited his mother's love of books and eventually went to Denver to study law, though he came back every summer to spend time in the mountains he loved. The cabin that had once been a bachelor's retreat became the heart of a sprawling family. Grandchildren came, bringing noise and chaos and joy. Emmett built a large table that could seat 16 people, and it was rarely empty. Holiday gatherings became legendary, with Willa cooking for days beforehand and the cabin filled with laughter and stories. Willa often thought about the strange path her life had taken. If she had not been sent to prison, if Emmett had not been at the gate that morning, if she had refused his offer of help, where would she be now? Dead in a ditch somewhere, probably, or scratching out a miserable existence in some town that would never accept her. Instead, she had found everything. She had found love with a man who saw past her mistakes to the strong woman underneath. She had found a home in the wild mountains of Colorado. She had found a family and a future that exceeded her wildest dreams. On a crisp autumn day in 1905, Willa stood on the porch of the cabin watching Emmett play with their youngest grandchild, a spirited little girl named Emma. Emmett was in his 60s now, his hair more silver than brown, his movements a bit slower than they used to be. But his eyes still lit up with the same love and warmth when he looked at her, and his laughter still made her heart skip a beat. Thomas came up beside her, tall and strong at 22, looking more like his father every year. "Ma," he said quietly, "I have been thinking about something, about what you went through before you met Pa." Willa tensed slightly, wondering where this was going. "I just wanted to say," Thomas continued, "that I am proud of you, for surviving, for being strong enough to build this life. You taught us that our past does not define us, that what matters is who we choose to be. That is a powerful lesson." Willa felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. That means more than you know. And Ma, Thomas added with a small smile, if Pa had not brought you home that day, we would not be here. So I am grateful he was stubborn enough to wait at that gate and kind enough to see what you could become. Willa pulled her son into a hug, overwhelmed with love and gratitude for the family she had been blessed with. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the family gathered for dinner. The table was crowded and loud, with multiple conversations happening at once, children arguing over biscuits, and Emmett telling one of his war stories that everyone had heard a dozen times but still loved. Willa looked around at all of them, these people who existed because she had taken a chance on a stranger who offered her hope when she had none. She thought about the woman she had been that cold morning in 1882, standing outside the prison with nothing, and the woman she was now, surrounded by love and purpose. Emmett caught her eye across the table and smiled, that same gentle smile that had first made her believe that maybe, just maybe, good men still existed in the world. She smiled back, putting all her love into that simple expression, and he nodded slightly, understanding passing between them without words. After dinner, after the children had been put to bed and the dishes were washed and put away, Willa and Emmett sat on the porch in their rocking chairs, watching the stars come out. The night was cool but not cold, and Emmett had draped a blanket over both their laps. "Do you remember the first night you stayed here?" Emmett asked suddenly. "You were so scared, so ready to bolt at any moment." "I remember," Willa said. "I could not understand why you were being kind to me. It did not make sense. And now I understand that some people are just good," Willa said. "That you saw someone who needed help and you helped without expecting anything in return. That is who you are, Emmett. That is who you have always been." "You made me better," Emmett said seriously. "You think I saved you, but Willa, you saved me too. I was just existing up here, going through the motions. You gave me a reason to live, not just survive. You gave me a family, a purpose, everything that matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being together as they had been for over 20 years now. The mountains rose around them, dark and protective, and the creek sang its endless song. "I am glad you waited at the gate," Willa said finally. "I am glad you got in that saddle," Emmett replied. "I am glad you brought me home." "This is your home," Emmett said firmly. "It always will be, Willa. For as long as we both live, this is where you belong." Willa reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I know," she said. "I finally know." The years continued their steady march forward. Willa and Emmett celebrated their 25th anniversary, then their 30th. More grandchildren came, and then great-grandchildren. The cabin was modified again to accommodate family gatherings, with Emmett building benches and tables, until the place could hold what seemed like half of Colorado. There were hard times too, of course. Sarah lost her first child in birth, and the whole family mourned together. James was injured in a riding accident and spent months recovering. The winter of 1910 was particularly brutal, and they lost half their livestock. But they weathered every storm together, the family that Willa and Emmett had built standing strong against whatever life threw at them. The example of their love, of their commitment to each other through everything, became a foundation that their children and grandchildren built their own lives upon. In the spring of 1915, Willa and Emmett celebrated their 32nd anniversary with a huge party that brought family from all over Colorado. The cabin and surrounding grounds were filled with people, 3 generations of Rourkes laughing and eating and celebrating. Thomas gave a toast, raising his glass high. "To Ma and Pa," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. Who taught us that love is not about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone who is perfect for you? Who showed us that family is not just about blood, but about the people who stand by you when times are hard? Who proved that second chances are real, and that with courage and hope, you can build something beautiful from the ashes of what came before? Everyone cheered and drank, and Willa looked at Emmett with tears streaming down her face. He pulled her into his arms, and they danced to the music. Someone was playing on a fiddle, moving slowly and carefully, their bodies knowing each other so well that they moved as one. "I love you," Willa whispered against his chest. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Emmett said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are my everything, Willa. Always have been, always will be." As the party continued around them, they stood in the middle of it all, holding each other close, grateful for every moment they had been given together. The final years were gentle ones. Emmett's body began to slow down, his joints aching in the cold, his steps more measured. Willa developed a cough that never quite went away, though the doctor said it was nothing serious. They spent more time sitting on the porch, less time working the land, but they were content. They had built something that would last beyond them, a family and a legacy of love. On a quiet morning in late 1920, Willa woke to find Emmett sitting up in bed, looking at her with an expression of wonder. "What is it?" she asked, concerned. "I was just thinking," Emmett said slowly, "about that first morning. When I saw you standing outside that prison gate, looking so lost and alone, I knew even then that you were going to change my life. I did not know how, but I knew it." "And did I?" Willa asked with a small smile. "Change your life, you became my life," Emmett said simply. "Everything good, everything that matters started that day. I waited at that gate hoping to help someone who needed it, and instead I found my soulmate. How lucky is that?" "I am the lucky one," Willa said, reaching for his hand. "You saved me, Emmett, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Emmett corrected gently. "That is what love is, Willa. Two people making each other better, stronger, more complete." They sat together as the sun rose over the mountains. They had called home for nearly 40 years, and Willa thought about the incredible journey they had been on. From that first ride up the mountain, her sitting rigid and scared in front of him, to now, when she could not imagine a single moment without him by her side. She thought about all the things she had survived, all the pain and hardship, and how it had all led her to this man, this place, this life. And she was grateful, endlessly grateful, for every twist and turn that had brought her here. Emmett Rourke had waited at the prison gate for a woman who had nowhere to go, and he had taken her home. In doing so, he had given her everything she never knew she needed. A home, a family, a purpose, and a love that had sustained her through everything life had thrown at them. As they sat watching the sunrise, surrounded by the mountains that had witnessed their entire love story, Willa knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged. In this cabin with this man, in this life, they had built together from nothing but hope and determination and love. And that, she thought, was worth more than all the gold in Colorado.